Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the last session for the day of Fireside Chat on the topic, Engineering the Future, Painting a 2030 Outlook. The products of the future should be designed to support the sustainability goals and net zero emissions objectives. It is not just a mandatory business strategy, but will be a key driver for future business growth. The objective of the session is to discuss the key engineering R&D imperatives that will be instrumental in shaping this sustainable future of global enterprises. Our speaker for the session is Paul Steen, Chief Technology Officer, Rolls Royce PLC. He has been with Rolls Royce since 2010 as Chief Scientific Officer. He has been accountable for the company's global investment in R&D, as well as fostering innovation and promoting and sustaining specialist engineering talent. Our moderator for this session is Raghu Ayaswamy, Senior Vice President and Global Head, Internet of Things, Tata Consultancy Services. Raghu leads direction to the world's leading companies as they transform into connected digital enterprises poised for growth in the Business 4.0 era. Raghu partners with global business leaders to help them unlock new opportunities and revenue models by harnessing the combined power of IoT and emerging digital technologies. Pleasure to have you both here with us this evening. Raghu, over to you.
Thank you, Justin. Good evening, everyone. Very happy to be part of this NASSCOM Engineering and R&D Summit 2021. We have a great session ahead of us today, and we have a great person joining us from Rolls Royce, Mr. Paul Steen, Chief Technology Officer, with me in this particular session. As all of you know, with the changing industry landscape and unlimited possibilities rendered by advent of many new technologies and digital first world, and also the compulsion to come out with new business models, global enterprises are looking beyond conventional approach for designing sustainable products. Sustainability is going to be the key agenda for us in the future. And the companies that are really focusing sustainability, not just as a business strategy alone, as actually a growth driver of their business, they are the ones who are going to win in this long future. And this topic would be very interesting for all of you. And I'm sure you will learn a lot from this session today with us. And we have Paul Steen, Chief Technology Officer, Rolls Royce. Paul, welcome to the session.
Thank you, Raghu. It's great to be here.
Very nice to have you. We are quite happy and quite thankful for taking the time to be with us today and sharing your views with this audience. Let me start off. This last 2 years have been very tough for every enterprise, and especially aerospace has been the most affected, and the Rolls-Royce business as well. So how do you see in terms of the business kind of recovering from it, and every industry has kind of reacted to this pandemic in very various manners, and accelerating innovation, adoption of remote and digital technologies and other things. So what do you see, Paul, Rolls-Royce is kind of planning out in terms of, I'm sure you would have done fantastic work into managing this. How are you actually seeing Rolls-Royce going into the future?
Well, that's a very good question to start with, Raghu. And it's certainly the COVID crisis has been a terrible crisis for the world in human tragedy, and of course in challenges for business as well. As a company whose civil aerospace business is focused on long-haul aviation, our long-haul business has had to adapt very quickly to something approaching a 40% reduction in long-haul traffic as the world responded to COVID. But there's a couple of bits of good news. So firstly, we're just not just in long-haul aviation, and for example, our business jet business has recovered much more quickly. In fact, for those that can afford to fly business jet aircraft, that market's recovered extremely quickly, as mostly high net worth individuals, but now increasingly there are small lease companies offering seats for people with more modest income start to use private aviation to start to connect. We're seeing long haul bounce back, and we're now seeing airlines saying recovery by 2024 is possible, back to 2019 levels, and there's some evidence that that's on the way. Our defense business hasn't really been hit at all by COVID for reasons you can imagine. And our power systems business, which is really the business that supplies generators, hybrid electric trains, microgrids, bounce back very quickly after COVID. So as a company, we've been managing to adapt reasonably fast to COVID. This year, we're looking to get back to cash neutrality. And also we've made some other structural changes in the business, which means that we think we're now on the way to a pretty bright future. And we've created a couple of new businesses following the COVID crisis and the subsequent focus on sustainability and net zero. And hopefully I'll talk more about that in the coming period. But those new businesses are our small modular reactor program and Rolls Royce Electrical, that is focused on all the propulsion technology for electric flight.
Okay, great. Thanks, Paul. And we actually look forward to getting back to normal travel and traveling in this fantastic A350 XWB engines of Rolls Royce, the fighter engines. So we look forward to that. And hopefully, I think we all can travel and meet up with each other. As this session is also looking at the future, the 2030 outlook, how we can enterprises look at the long-term future, and there becomes the sustainability agenda for every company at the main point of not as business strategy, also for growth. I see that Rolls-Royce has very clearly laid out sustainability agenda and plans. It will be good to know from you what are all those steps, and it's not something which you do for a few years, it's the long-term strategy. So what steps are Rolls-Royce taking? And it's an industry which is also quite technology intensive. Your engines are not, today are very technology complex products. So in such kind of environment, how do you actually do this transition to net zero? And how are you directing those innovation?
So you've quite rightly pointed out that Rolls-Royce has signed up to a number of global initiatives to drive our scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions to net zero by 2050. In other words, we are part of the solution to driving to net zero. And our response to that really is a response in 2 parts, because aviation is a particularly hard to decarbonize sector. And we've got a decarbonisation strategy in aviation, which aligns with a global momentum that's building in how this should be done. And then there's the non-aviation side, which is a slightly different story, but with the same outcome, which is to get to net zero by 2050. So aviation, the story is quite complicated and quite big, but I'll simplify it in the following way if I can, which is that for the flying machine, there are what's called 3 pillars of decarbonisation. So the first is that we have to continue on a relentless journey to make our engines, and you kindly refer to the Trent XWB, which is currently the world's most fuel efficient engine in service today. We need to make the engines and airframe combinations ever more fuel efficient, to reduce CO2 further from a period when we're burning fossil fuels, but perhaps more importantly, as we move into an era of sustainable aviation fuels, which will be a little more expensive, we need to have products that burn less of them. So the first pillar is engine airframe efficiency. The second pillar is the world needs a massive ramp up of SAFs, sustainable aviation fuels. And these are fuels where the carbon in the hydrocarbon does not come from fossil-based carbon, it comes from atmospheric carbon. It's a complicated topic. I can refer back to it in a bit if you wish, Raghu, but there's many pathways to making SAFs. There's not one silver bullet. And we're working closely with the big energy companies around the world like Shell to ensure the ramp up of SAFs. The third pillar is the use of novel technologies. So this is electric, hybrid electric, and hydrogen. But I'll say straight away that this does not form the bulk of aviation CO2. So right now, 75% of all CO2 that we emit in aviation is on route lengths longer than 1,500 kilometers. And very few of these novel technologies are really for large aircraft carrying large numbers of people long distances. So whilst we're exploring these novel technologies and putting a lot of investment into them, I should say it's not the bulk of CO2. Then there's the non-aero part of the business, and perhaps one of our big bets is what we call our small modular reactor program, which is a way of significantly reducing the cost of nuclear power. It's a new way of constructing nuclear power stations, which is not about creating new physics. It's about rethinking how we manufacture power stations and deploy them, playing to modern digital manufacturing methods to achieve that end. And then our power systems business is having to make ever more fuel efficient systems. So for example, even luxury yachts these days are supplied with hybrid electric solutions, so that, for example, for in-harbor movement, the yachts move on pure electric power and only switch on the diesels, perhaps burning biodiesel, on the open ocean. So that's the sort of overall strategy for how we move towards net zero. One of the things that is really good, a sort of circular part of that strategy, is that our small modular reactor is actually an ideal low carbon energy source for the creation of sustainable aviation fuels. Okay. So we're hoping that one of the ways in which the SMR is used is as an energy source for SAF production. Okay. So there's a lot more detail in there, and Raghu, and I'm happy to go into any more detail you wish, but that's the overall strategy.
Sure. One of the things enterprises are faced with is how do we really manage our R&D budget, right? So I know in Rolls Royce, you spend around $1.3 billion in research and development and their product development. And I see in one of the reports, like 20% of your annual spend will be spent on low carbon solutions, hybrid electric power by 2023. Do you see that level of continued investment and focus is needed by every enterprise for us to go into these kind of low carbon technologies?
Yes, I believe so. I think for any company and all your member companies, certainly that make hard tech as opposed to high tech, and I'll say a little bit about high tech decarbonization in a while, but in hard tech, you need to think about how R&D is split between what we call sustaining engineering. So particularly in safety critical industries like aviation, you can't just develop a product and then wave goodbye to it. It needs continuous tender loving care in service. Our jet engines are constantly monitored 24 hours a day in service, and sustaining engineering is needed to make sure that, for example, if service intervals aren't quite what they need to be, that we put engineering into correcting that, etc., etc. Part of the budget is spent on making our products ever more fuel efficient, so helping us get towards a net zero era. And this is true of power generation, ground-based products, as well as aviation products, because whatever fuel you use, using less of that fuel is a good thing. So whether it be fossils or non-fossil based fuels. So some of the money is spent on that. And then some of the R&D is spent on new directions, which are emerging as part of a net zero economy. It is quite exciting because one way of thinking about the net zero economy is to say that globally we use about $4 trillion a year of coal, gas, and oil. And by 2050, all of that needs to be repurposed. So this is a massive new industry that's emerging. And the industries that replace that $4 trillion won't be $4 trillion. It'll be far greater in value because fossils are quite cheap to dig out of the ground, especially coal. So there's going to be a massive new economy growing. So some of your R&D budget needs to be focused on, how can I help net zero by using the talent I've got in my business to help that slice of decarbonization.
And another area of interest we see it's emerging is the kind of urbanization that is happening, and we will have another 1 billion more people in the globe, and there is a lot of mobility concepts are being discussed, especially, for example, automotive companies are thinking about ride sharing and shared mobility and those kind of concepts. And I also saw Rolls Royce also is trying to focus or kind of do some innovation around urban air mobility. So if you can kind of throw some light on how that things are coming up, it will be great to know for us.
This is a really exciting era. And in fact, it's an era that will need talent, not just from Rolls Royce, but from the digital industries, manufacturing industry, new materials technology. And it's the era of electric and hybrid electric aviation. And electric and hybrid electric aviation, either in fixed wing form, so electric aircraft with conventional wings and propellers that are driven by electric motors, powered either by just batteries or by turboelectric systems, can connect city pairs far more effectively than has ever been done before. You can have the concept of an air taxi between two city pairs very cheaply, a pure electric taxi, very quiet and very fast turnaround time with modern charging methods. And then also electrification allows you to look at what's called eVTOL technology. That's electric vertical takeoff and landing technology, where you don't really want to take off vertically and land vertically unless you have to, because it uses a lot more energy to take off and land vertically. But what it does do, of course, is it means you don't need a big airport. You can use like a helipad to connect bits of a city together in a way that you couldn't do beforehand. Now, this is really exciting, and it's exciting from a number of different dimensions. Firstly, because in crowded, sprawling conurbations, and I know India has many of them, and increasingly Africa, of course, is growing its large cities as well. You can start connecting parts of cities together through low-cost, quiet eVTOL travel in a way that's just not been possible before. So offering a sort of shuttle service across the city is definitely seen as a vision that will be followed. It's not just about moving mass commuter market. It's also, for example, a new type of air ambulance is being thought about. So if you've got a compact eVTOL, which is much easier to fly than a compound rotor helicopter, a conventional helicopter, then accessing people who are in need of emergency care from a road traffic accident or a heart attack is so much easier with an eVTOL device. So we're bound to see new types of service model develop. And I know many of your members are in the digital world, and this needs a rich seam of digital technology to make all this happen, because whilst I'm the first to say this is a really challenging propulsion system technology to get the energy density up, to get the reliability up. The airframe, of course, needs to be have the same level of development and lightweight capability, which means new materials, new manufacturing methods. But there's a world of digital capability to provide mobility as a service. And that digital capability is right down at the AI level to reduce pilot workload. So these aircraft are just as easy to fly as a car is to drive. So you don't need very expensive helicopter training or civil aviation training, right the way up to the whole mobility as a service framework. So as a customer, you just want to get from one place in a city to another place, and the digital infrastructure is in place just to get you a taxi ride to the heliport across the city, taxi the other end, and you'll just have an app on your phone that just says, I want to get to such and such a place. Really exciting era. And I'm sure, by about 2030, we're going to see a much changed view of urban mobility.
Oh, it's a great, exciting to have that kind of mobility, because especially in some of the cities in India, it takes 2 to 3 hours to compute from the airport to the city center and the places of work. So it will be a great relief for those kind of traffic congestion. Actually, Paul, in India, if you look at the software, digital industry, and also engineering centers, innovation R&D centers, or it has become like a hotbed of innovation. And today, technologies are also merging, like you said, between artificial intelligence, IoT, and many technologies are coming together. And we have an excellent set of talent pool from multiple institutes supporting various industries. So this is the kind of mix of the industries that this forum, the summit, is representing. So if you have to give us some kind of what should be the India strategy for us to look at this future of products and the various industries for 2030, what would be your few pointers to us?
So that's a question that I get asked quite a lot in the UK, in America, in Singapore, and I'm delighted to give a similar answer to India. Because really, wherever you are in the world, it's the same formula that lets a country either win or lose in this race to become a leading provider of engineering and development in a changing world. And I think there are around about 6 factors, and I'll just say them very quickly, because I think these 6 factors apply everywhere in the world. And the first, you've said it yourself, is talent. There's no question the talent pipeline, having a great crop of graduates coming out of universities and then great training for graduates when they enter organizations. Without talent, you can't even start. So that's the first point. And I understand the output from India's engineering schools is huge on a global stage. So that's a tick in the box for India on that one. The second is the entrepreneurial environment. And what do I mean by that? I mean that if I want to accelerate a capability, I need patient capital. I need the ability to scale without having to borrow from my parents. Again, having the capability to access patient capital, either because government's investing or private industry is investing, the second enabler. So question, has India got that? The third is infrastructure, which I know India has had some challenges with in the past, but hopefully that's now on the way to being sorted. This is digital infrastructure, roads and rails. You mentioned 2.5 hours to get from the airport to the middle of some cities. But more seriously, the connectivity provided by infrastructure, digital connectivity, human connectivity, mass transit, road network, air network is all part of becoming an enterprise economy. The fourth factor is regulation. There's nothing that does a better job of stopping enterprise than red tape. So always seen from the perspective of the startup trying to create that technology to make India great. What's getting in the way of them scaling? What's the unnecessary red tape? And can India go entirely online? Actually, the UK has done a pretty good job of this. Most of the sort of so-called red tape is now kind of online. There's very few physical forms you fill in anymore. India needs to be there as well. The fifth, of course, is the cost base. Because whether we like it or not, if things are expensive to produce in one place, then many companies will choose to take it elsewhere. And the sixth one is we all have got to choose our unique selling propositions. So not every country in the world can do everything, even India, even America, actually. And so what is it that India wants to be unique with? What does it want to uniquely provide the world? And I won't answer that question. I'll leave it as a question for perhaps the people in the audience.
That's a homework for us.
That's definitely homework for India. Yes, yes.
No, thanks, Paul. I think all the 6 factors you laid out are very important to us. And this the whole objective of this summit and the forum is to reflect on what we could contribute and how we can actually plan out the future. And given the whole world we want to build as a sustainable and eco-friendly world of products and services, We want to also prepare ourselves, the enterprises as well as the engineers as individuals, to be technology ready and able to actually come up with those innovations that we can support this sustainable long-term outlook for our globe. And it was a great pleasure for all of us to join you in this forum and have you here in this summit. And really thank you very much for taking your time out of your busy schedule to be with us today.
Thanks very much, Raghu. I've been honored by being allowed to talk to your members, and it's been a great session, and thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Raghu and Paul. That was a great way to end day 2. We thoroughly enjoyed that fireside chat on the topic Engineering the Future, Painting a 2030 Outlook.